In the previous topic, we showed how functions in JavaScript are treated as first class because they are treated like other values. In this topic, we're going to expand on that idea as we talk about higher order functions. Higher order functions are simply functions that act on other functions by either taking them in as an argument or by returning a function. We saw examples of that in the previous topic. In fact, the last two examples showed higher order functions. The fact that JavaScript supports first class functions makes it possible to create higher order functions. So the concept of first class functions explains how functions are treated in JavaScript as values. The concept of higher order functions explains how we use them. Now here are those last two examples we used in the previous topic. We have a set timeout and we're passing in a function here. And we also have another parameter, which is the amount of time. So the fact that we can use a function as a parameter and pass that in makes this function acting on, the set timeout function, acting on other functions. This is the one that's passed in that it's acting on. And so because of that, it is a higher order function. Down here, this getFun function. This one returns a function, and because it's acting on other functions, it is a higher order function. So basically, higher order functions either take functions as a parameter or return them. So we understand what higher order functions are, but why are they so important? Now, the most common application of higher order functions in JavaScript is the callback. There are several methods in JavaScript that allow us to pass a function that will be used as part of that method or function. So it'll be called back. Anytime we create an event listener, we're setting up a callback. And so they're pretty common in JavaScript. Now I want to use the set timeout function as an example and dissect why it is better as a higher order function. What makes it better? So I'm going to go to a different code file now where I've got two set timeout functions already created. Now first I want to focus on the last parameter, which is the amount of milliseconds that the set timeout runs. So we are passing in data there. And by passing in data to the set timeout function, it makes it more flexible. Instead of calling a set timeout function that always runs for 3 seconds, we can pass in the number of milliseconds we want it to run. And it will run for that number. So by being able to pass in data, it makes the function more flexible. It also helps prevent us from repeating code. If we had to have a set timeout function that ran for 3 seconds and one that ran for 4 seconds, they're basically doing very similar things, just a different amount of time. And so by being able to pass in data like we've done here, we hold to that dry principle. Don't repeat yourself. Don't repeat code. We do that by passing in a parameter. Well, the same thing can be said for passing in a function, for making a higher order function. The data that we pass in controls its flexibility by what data it can act on. The function we passed in controls its flexibility by affecting the functional aspect of it. So let's take these two examples. I have a set timeout that after a second, it simply logs to the console logging. That's one example. I have a set timeout down here that after 2 seconds, it logs or it returns 2 plus 2. That's another example. Now, it's possible that in order to meet both of those functional requirements, we could have created a set timeout log function that every time it was called, it logged something to the console. We just passed in the data that we wanted logged. And we could create a set timeout add function that every time it was called, it would add some numbers after the time expired. That would be two separate functions, and we would be repeating code. But because set timeout is higher order, we can pass in a function that can do anything. So it's more flexible. Some may argue it's more complex. And I think it is when you first learn about it, when you first learn about higher order functions and understanding how to use them. But once you're familiar with them, it's really not that much more difficult. It really isn't. And the flexibility becomes very powerful. So that whole concept of dry, don't repeat yourself, is one of the reasons we want to have higher order functions. Now, as I mentioned, JavaScript is full of higher order functions. Methods on many of the different types are higher order functions. For example, arrays have several methods that are higher order. They accept a function as a parameter, and then it does something using the function that is passed in. But I just want to point out and make you aware that higher order functions are found all over in JavaScript. And I think some people that are new to JavaScript or just beginning in JavaScript, they avoid them because they seem complex, but you can't avoid them. They are so powerful. All right, let's move on to the next topic.